Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Southborough Housing Opportunity Partnership Committee for Wednesday, February 1st, 2023. We are going to have to do roll call tonight because we're meeting via Zoom. First thing on the agenda is the approval of our minutes. Does anybody have any discussions or changes, corrections to those?
I had some.
Okay, go ahead, Andrew.
Let's see, I just got some spelling typo type stuff on line 22. It says pan, it should be plan.
Okay.
On line 42, should be attended rather than attend. And those are the only ones that I had.
I think John Wood's name is got a small W at for Wood in several places.
Wood should be capital. Okay, perfect. Okay, we're gonna have to vote on approval of the minutes. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes from Tuesday, January 10th, 2023?
So moved.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? Tom?
Aye.
Andrew?
Aye.
Doug?
Aye.
Jesse?
Aye.
And Dorianne is aye. Those minutes are approved as corrected. Okay. Next item on the agenda is the subcommittee update. Tom, do we have anything or we're just waiting? Okay.
Sorry, I swear on the Bible that I have put a lot of hours and a lot more text into the thing. I was hoping to get it out to all the subcommittee members before this meeting so I could report that there was a draft that was circulated, but I just didn't get there. I think I should have it out. 98% done with the draft that's going to be ready to go to the subcommittee members to review and vet. And, it's a little rough. There's citation things and things like that, things to check, but it's pretty close. So I'm sorry I didn't get it by now. I know I promised by this meeting, but I didn't quite make it.
It's okay. We just need it by June.
Well, I will say that at the select board, we had a presentation from the capital planning committee maybe like a month ago, and where they talked about the capital plan for the next 4 or 5 years. And so there's some elements of that depend on that, and there was some follow-up about asking what the status of it is. So it'll be great once we have it, because there's some decisions that have to be made of the capital plan that are dependent somewhat on what's going to happen with that property.
I'm hearing you. I know it's going to be time sensitive.
So we need it ASAP.
Accelerate it.
Tom,
just out of curiosity, Andrew, what kinds of capital planning issues were there? Because I guess what we sort of contemplate, and I'm not a policymaker, I'm just a scrub researcher who's helping put together this report. But I guess we contemplated that the report would just give information to the policymakers, like the people on the select board, as to what they want to do with the property, and
okay,
and whether the feasibility of doing affordable housing, the sub factors that go into. We have extensive discussion about the zoning, provisions that go into whether and to what extent that property can be redeveloped for affordable housing and things like that. So I guess we envision that, the policymakers will take that under advisement, make a decision over the next, 6 months or something like that. And if they decide to do something, they'll do the next step, to implement some policy,
okay,
whether they, change zoning or whether they talk to a developer. I guess I don't see anything proactive happening on that property for years.
Yeah.
But I don't know. So I'm curious to compare notes. Is there something that the select board is contemplating, or the capital plan?
No, other than that, I remember. Okay, remember there was another iteration of this where there was actually an RFP submitted, and there was a bid, and then there was
a couple years ago, right? Yeah.
But I think part of the backdrop of that was that there's some capital needs for that property that things you would need to do in the short term to maintain it, where
Yeah.
you're coming up to a crossroads where do you want to try to sell it or try to pass it off into another party if they would be responsible, take on the responsibility to make those improvements, and the town might have to provide some other benefit to them. So that's part of like, it's part of just the evening out or just planning for, you know, this school is going to need a new roof and this road's going to be paved, and just thinking about what are the big capital items coming up in the next 5 years. This is one
thing.
where,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Andrew. I don't want to cut you off.
no, I think you understood where I was going. But
yeah, and actually, we had a conversation about that for 2 more minutes of discussion on this, so we don't bore everyone else to death. But there was a discussion. There have been discussions with the subcommittee throughout as to whether, you know, the town should defer maintenance and things like that on the property, depending on what they do with it. And again, based on the assumption that really nothing, even if they want to convert this to affordable housing, they decide to do so, you know, no shovel is going to hit the ground, no hammer is going to be swung for probably years. I mean, it's just, you need a developer, you need to plan it, you need to design it, you need to do site work. I don't know whether there's going to be demo. I mean, there's a lot, nothing really immediate is going to happen. So the takeaway from that was whatever maintenance needs to be done should continue to be done.
yeah,
If there's a major thing like replace the roof, and it's got to, just making up a number, there's $500,000 to replace the roof. You know, that's a big item that a decision would need to be made.
sure.
Because one of the considerations is whether the school building gets torn down or whether it stays up.
Okay, yeah.
And, you know, again, I'm not a policymaker, but the current seems to be that people want to preserve the building. So if I had a bet, you know, on something, I'd say if the roof needs to be replaced, they should go ahead and replace it. And not, you know, not wait 2 years to decide whether, you know, some developer wants to come in and tear it down.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's helpful, but.
Okay. No, I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
Okay. So Tom, as soon as you can get that report, it would be appreciated. It looks like capital needs it done sooner than later. So I'm going to leave that in your very able hands to take care of for me. I don't have to do it. Thank you. Okay. Next item on the agenda is the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, the 5-year plan. So the MAPC final draft, you have that in your packet. And Andrew, I will get that over to Mark Purple to distribute to the Board of Selectmen. But that final draft is you have, and that is what we will be using to implement our housing production plan. So,
okay.
And this will be coming into play probably in future meetings. So I would print this up and keep this with your file and probably bring it to the meetings as we go forward. A suggestion. So you have to, well, you may want to look at your computer, but I'm old school, so I printed mine. Okay. Warrant article. So we have a warrant article for the town meeting, and I'm not sure who's presenting it. I believe that the Board of Selectmen, because we are SHOPC and there are appointing authority. I'm not sure, Andrew, but I believe that you probably present it unless you want one of us to do it. I'm not really sure how that works.
Okay. All right.
We can't present a warrant article. I think you have to because we're our presenting authority.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So you have in front of you that language that Jay Tellerman gave us to see if the town will vote to transfer from community preservation funds a sum of money to the Affordable Housing Trust for the purposes of facilitating affordable housing consistent with General Law Chapter 44B and General Law Chapter 44, Section 55. That sum of money won't be known until we get to town meeting. And I'm not sure if we need to specify that transfer with the amount that is put into the housing bucket for the year. I'm not really sure which number they want to use, but Jay can let us know what that would be. And we would probably have to say that on town meeting floor.
Yep. And just one follow-up from our last discussion. I know there were a bunch of emails going back and forth that I was on some of with Jay Tallerman, and he says that you can't do a warrant article that just going forward for every year automatically.
No, you have to put one in every year.
Yeah, you just have to do it each year.
Yeah. Yeah.
In other words, it's just a matter of whoever drafts the warrant article every year, omit the part that says the money goes to CPC first, or at CPC discretion, whatever that controversial line was.
Which he took out in this verbiage. So CPC would present the chain. So the chain would have to start with CPC, and they would say, $50,000 is going to go into the housing bucket, $50,000 is going to historic, $50,000 is going into the general fund, and they would specify the amounts. Once those amounts are set, once those amounts are approved by town meeting, that's the money, that is the amount that gets transferred, that would go transferred. CPC would have to transfer that from their monies to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And we would have to do this article just as CPC does every year. Their warrant articles, this would have to go in every year to transfer that money every year. Correct, Andrew? That's my understanding from what.
Yep.
Okay. Well, so we're aware of that. So that's our language. Does anybody have any questions or comments or want to discuss it any further? Nope. Okay. Moving on, because we don't have to vote that. MRD. And I'm going to hand the meeting over to Jesse, and he is going to discuss the MRD with all of us because it's very complicated and you don't want me to explain it to you.
Orion, you just have to enable participant sharing. It's just disabled by the host. And I'm the co-host. If you go down to the share button and
your screen, yeah.
Click on the share button, it should give you like a menu to say who can share. And you want to just say all panelists.
Says share. No, there's nothing there for that. Hold on. Let's see if there's a multiple participants can share simultaneously. How's that? Okay, that should work. See if you can share it, Jesse.
Here, you should be all set.
Ah, I did it! Yay! I get a gold star.
Don't cheer yet.
I'm cheering.
All right, let's start with the good news. Section E of the MRD is all the affordable housing provisions. So basically anybody who wants to build multifamily housing is subject to this section of the town code, which is 174-13.8, right?
Which page is that on, Jesse? 5?
So, sorry, 0.2. So this is the agenda item, 174-13.2 of the code.
Got it.
And as it pertains to SHOPC, Section E, affordable housing, I thought I would start off with the positive side of the current code, which requires 12.5% to be affordable. And it goes into great detail on the affordability requirements here in subsection 2, which is, I find it very, appropriate for the spirit of affordable housing in terms of durability, keeping affordable, the 30% of the annual gross income being the qualifier. And then it gets into development standards and the incentive to the developer, which of course is density bonus under the flex. So there is some good stuff in the current MRD. The challenging part is back up here in section, where were we? I think it was, here we go. So it's section 5, section D, subsection 5, multifamily requirements. Particularly this one right here. This is kind of like the nail in the coffin, so to speak. Is that you actually have to have single family dwellings on the site, detached single families. So if you can't just, you know, as Tom and I have labored intensively, more Tom than me, on 21 Highland, on that site, it's not like we can just throw up a 20 unit apartment building. Other than obviously the height restrictions in the town code, this right here, the MRD is, you know, it giveth and it taketh away in terms of affordable housing. So how would a developer, you know, work through this? You'd have to go to flex. And I'm not even gonna try to navigate around that. But flex development basically does have some exceptions. There was one part actually I wanted to highlight that I went through with Karina today. It basically stipulated that the planning board does have the authority, if it decides, to grant a special permit. So a developer could go, in theory, in front of the planning board. But
page 15, and it's under B, under 2B, and that's number 1.
Look at that
Page.
Well, you are good, my friend.
I'm paying attention.
So I would think that for our charter, we might want to consider making some adjustments to MRD. Now, what trumps this, of course, is 40B or overlay districts. So for example, in the downtown district, this does not apply. You can by right, without a special permit, put a 10-unit apartment building up in the downtown area. Of course, we all know 40B, you can circumvent this. And then if MBTA communities passes, that would make this moot as well. What are your questions, fellow SHOPC members?
2 questions. I'm just raising my hand, asking, is that okay? Or,
yeah, absolutely.
Chair,
Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. There was a mention in the strategic plan about maybe trying to make this a more flexible, productive tool, right? So that's like why we're talking about it. That's one of the, and I thought it was interesting that there was a observation made there that there's also the minimum lot size requirements, and that the minimum lot size requirements are greater than the lot sizes for most parcels in village business district. Is that something also that you think that we should be taking a look at?
I couldn't agree more, Mr. Dennington. So you might look at me as a planning board member and say, gee, Mr. Stein, what have you been doing for the past 10 years?
I'm not asking. Don't worry. And I understand how bureaucracy works or doesn't work.
I know you of all people do. The part of the reason I am slow to go on a crusade against the MRD, so to speak, is I'm always careful based on experience about what I think will work at town meeting. So it's a return on investment of effort question. But we may be getting to the point where we could consider making the change that you just described, Andrew, and the this requirement to have single family housing. Now, what the hard part is, if we're not gonna have any choice with, if MBTA communities comes in, and who knows what else the state's going to do. If the state starts overlaying stuff that we have little or no say over, or threatening to take away grants if we don't implement zoning changes, then I think the appetite at town meeting is going to be diminished. Would you agree, Andrew?
Yeah, I think you're saying kind of see how that plays out. And then also that's kind of relevant a little bit to one of the other items on the agenda about the Dell EMC property. And then, you know, discussion about there, because there's been and Doug, I think also is really on top of this, maybe more current than certainly I am, but the requirement that used to be 50 acres immediately around the train station has been relaxed, and now you can kind of, there's a mix and match element of it, and that the you could cite the overlay district where multifamily housing is as of right, and if you did it on the Dell EMC property where they're already coming in to do a 40B anyway, then you could kind of get two birds with one stone. You could get the benefit of satisfying the MBTA community's requirement of having created the multi-family housing as of right district, but you also did it in a place where there was likely going to be a 40B development anyway. And that's, I mean, I think one thing that might have better town meeting support, right, is affordable housing that has less of an immediate impact on immediate residential neighborhoods. There's no immediate residential neighborhoods on that site, right? And it doesn't have, it's along Route 9, but it doesn't have the same access traffic issues that Park Central has. So that's something that, you know, I'm kind of hopeful about.
We have that. That's a little bit later on the agenda too.
Yeah,
we are discussing that. So
I think that's the point that is relevant to this agenda item is that overlay districts are going to be much easier to work with this town from a legislative, so to speak, standpoint.
One thing I saw mentioned in the strategic plan that I thought was interesting also is something that I've been thinking about for a while, but haven't really done anything concrete on, which is I thought it was interesting. There was also a recommendation to the part of the zoning code about accessory apartments to take out the cap where there's this totally artificial, weird cap. You need to go to 3 different boards to get an accessory apartment approved. You need to go to the Board of Health, apply to them, or at least let them not respond. That's about whether there's adequate sewage. And then you have to go to both the ZBA and the planning board. And there's a cap based on the total number of accessory apartments in town can't be more than, I think, 7% of the total single family homes built since 1979 or something like that. It's just this weird formula. And there's been a nationwide trend of trying to make it easier to build accessory apartments. I think there was a story just in the New York Times a couple of days ago about it. So I was very interested to see that recommendation of just take out the cap. Now, one thing I don't know, I remember time.
Why not make it by right? I haven't understood that.
Okay.
And I tend to
that would be even more ambitious.
I never understood why we have a special permitting process for an accessory dwelling, but
yeah. I remember on this when I was in the ZBA, we had ones where there were some people with some very strong feelings about some people accessory dwellings when we were on the ZBA. I think Tom, you might have been on.
I remember some of those. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the other one, Andrew, is, I mean, there's a cap on accessory apartments, which, on what I view as a small scale means if somebody wants to put one extra apartment on their property, they got to go through all these hoops, and there's a cap. In my view, and with this, we touch upon this in the 21 Highland memo report. I think from a bigger sort of policy standpoint, there's a similar cap in the elderly housing section.
That's up to 4 units now, by the way.
What?
We can go up to 4 now. Karina mentioned the other
beautiful day. 4. That's going to change all of our. So the point is, the elderly housing bylaw. So the big rubric of all this is that there's no or very few mechanisms in the zoning bylaws that allow for multifamily housing. And each of them has problems. We're addressing some MRD, which I want to have a couple of points I want to just come back to really quickly. But another problem, elderly housing, that's an opportunity. The problem is there's an arbitrary cap on that in that bylaw as well. So, I mean, it definitely, that should be a target of our, policy agenda, is to get rid of that cap, because right now, as Jesse just said, under the cap, there's only 4 units of elderly housing that could be still constructed under that cap at this point, which just prevents, and there's a bad need for it. Our housing production plan just identified the fact that our, Southborough population is aging, and there's a real need for over 55 housing and elderly housing, and it can't be done under our elderly housing. And of course, 40B is always the panacea, but it's at some point in the not too distant future, that 10% cap is going to be hit, and then developers are no longer going to be incentivized to do a 40B project in the town of Southborough, which would be bad for housing, and bad for elderly housing, and bad for affordable housing.
Or overlay districts.
So the only thing we can do, because 40B is not a zoning bylaw, that's a state statute that overrides local zoning. So I think from a policy standpoint for SHOPC and the Board of Selectmen is to try to revamp our existing zoning bylaws to help to remove obstacles in our zoning bylaws to affordable housing. Elderly housing is one, the accessory apartments another. Both of those are identified by our consultant in the housing production plan. And then if I could just make a couple of points on the MRD for a second. The real big sort of structural problem with the MRD, it's not a problem, it's just the MRD in concept is really what we call a cluster subdivision bylaw, the whole purpose of which is to preserve open space. So if somebody has a 40-acre parcel of land and they can chop that up into 20 house lots or whatever, 20-acre land, they can chop it up into 30 house lots. They have to use every single inch of the land to create those house lots. The point of the MRD is to say, hey, developer, we'll allow you to build on smaller house lots in exchange for you keeping a big chunk of that 20 acres as open space. And the trade-off is, if you can prove to us that you could have gotten 20 houses on that lot, we'll give you the same 20 houses in a smaller lot, clustered in a smaller area, so you can keep it open space. So it's a good policy, it's good environmental policy, it's cost-wise, it's cheaper for developers. Lots of good things about open space preservation bylaws like that.
Sorry, but we have actually had some affordable units added, and affordable, certainly cash contributions. So I'm thinking of one development in particular. I apologize for interrupting, but I just wanted to clarify that there has actually been affordable housing.
Yeah, no,
at least
that's what I like
to the trust.
In the MRD, it's nice. They have an affordable housing component. So the only way that multifamily concept comes into the MRD is that they say, okay, those same 20 hypothetical houses that I just talked about, the MRD is saying, hey, if you want, you can take those 20 houses and instead of putting 20 separate houses on 20 separate smaller house lots, you can combine some of those houses and make them multifamily. If at least, a third of those are still single family houses. So that's where a third single family house requirement comes in. It's in the context of that open space cluster development. So it really isn't intended standing by itself to be a mechanism to facilitate dense multifamily housing, because the whole concept is that if you want to have multifamily housing under the MRD, you have to have a huge parcel of land to justify the number of units to create open space. It doesn't do what I think we need a bylaw to do, which is to say, hey, we have 10 acres and we want to put 20 acres of an apartment building or multifamily on a smaller lot and not have this requirement of open space. So I think that's the structural problem with the MRD from the standpoint of having that be the mechanism to create multifamily housing. It's really not built or intended for that.
So it's going to be tough to approach it as eliminating open space protection. But I'm wondering.
Yeah, no, I don't think we would do that. We wouldn't propose that. But I think I'm basically saying that the MRD really isn't the mechanism to have a bylaw for affordable housing. I don't think we can just tweak it because it's too ingrained with the fundamental purpose of it, which was open space preservation. Even though it's got really good provisions and well drafted, well conceived for affordable housing that we just went over, and it's well crafted. I always wish that we could take some of those concepts that are in the MRD and take them out and put them into a separate bylaw that allows for multifamily housing, because they're good concepts for multifamily housing.
So I keep going back to the overlay. Like we did that basically for the downtown district. So I'm wondering.
Yeah, we could do that.
Okay.
And that would that's another mechanism of zoning. So that may be. I think we're sort of saying the same thing, Jesse. I think, which is that in meetings we've said we could just tweak the MRD to make it achieve what we wanted to achieve. But I think we're both now saying I don't think that's really. That might be the right pathway, because it's really tweaking that is really not the. We would be taking away the function of the MRD. We need a different mechanism to get multifamily housing in Southborough.
Well, I do wonder though, like, what if we just removing the single family presence requirement in exchange for some kind of affordable housing, requirement? I don't know.
I think, to give an example, Jesse, let's use 21 Highland as an example of why that doesn't work. Because under the MRD, right, 21 Highland is 3.5 acres or 4 acres. So under the, and all the, the developers we've spoken to said, hey, you could develop that for multifamily housing to get 12 to 15 units on it. Well, under the MRD, even aside from that single family housing requirement, we'd have to show that we could get 15 house lots, conventional size house lots on that 3-acre parcel, which we cannot. So that determines the unit number that we can put into a multifamily project on 21 Highlands. So since we don't have a huge piece of land that would otherwise support 15 conventional house lots, we're not able to get the 15 multifamily units that we, maybe the policy makers might want to develop on there and is feasible to develop on there. And again, it's just the animal. The MRD is not built to do that. It's built to do something else.
Right. I would agree.
So can you guys hear me? Just a couple quick additional thoughts to throw on that. I definitely agree with the discussion. It seems like trying to modify the MRD heavily may just be easier to have a new zoning district. And, going back to what Andrew was saying, I don't think we want the state or the MBTA doing our zoning for us, right? And so I do think there's a real opportunity to create zoning for the MBTA Communities Act that meets those requirements. And to Andrew's point, we might as well put it, especially now we can split it, we might as well put it over pieces of land that, don't impact neighborhoods. So again, like the EMC site, I do think that's a better way. But Tom, to your point too, and Jesse, I do think the affordable housing requirements in the MRD look actually honestly really good, right? And it also has the 70% preference, for town residents and employees, right? Which I think is an important item. So anyways, I would just say, if you're trying to modify the MRD, you'd have to get rid of that kind of 2/3 requirement. Can't be more, than the multifamily. You got to get rid of the single family home. But the first thing I noticed when I was going through it, the additive between the wetlands and the open space, you really weren't left with much, right? So at some point, it's like, and Jesse, like you said, how much political capital are we spending to try to modify something as opposed to focusing on I don't want to say the bigger problem, but the MBTA Communities Act, and to, focus on really a zone that would work. And now that we can split it up, you can probably be tighter to the commuter rail station, then focus on some larger parcels that are on Route 9, which may just, be better. But those are the thoughts on that. And then going back to accessory dwelling units, definitely some other towns have had great success where they have allowed it as of right in certain zones, right? So, the village district or certain places where the town's not, concerned with. And then other places could still be by special permit, and maybe some zones it's not allowed, right? Because again, we do have a very eclectic town as to, areas, but the ADUs is definitely, for this board, they're really trying to create, apartments that can be rented or more affordable for folks. And it is a benefit to our residents too, or our taxpayers, right? Because, many of these are actually homeowner, or owner occupied. And it's it's the apartment. It could be for, their parents, or it could be for college. Who knows what it is? But I am a big fan of ADUs, but it cannot go through 3 layers of approvals, because what homeowner is going to take the risk of that process? That's just insane.
The ones that we dealt with, Tom and I, when we were on the ZBA, were people basically they got caught with in-law apartments that they put in not in the right way, and then they came kind of looking for forgiveness and trying to retroactively get permitted, and they kind of jumped through all these hoops. That's how I became a little bit familiar with this. But I think you're right of just having to get multiple layers of approval. I was thinking about one thing, you just take out the cap, but it sounds like what you're suggesting is do something a little more ambitious about trying to think about places where it could be allowed as of right.
Yeah. And this is really a question for Jesse. He's more familiar with this, being on the planning board, but that's a way of thinking of the strategy of how you get through it, whether it's town meeting or something where, there are certain places that people are not going to want it, right? Or there might be a lot of resistance, but there may be other places where there's very little resistance. And so, but for it to be really effective, there's got to be portions that are as of right? And they can still be, design guidelines or parameters, right? So that, it's like, an additional unit per lot, right? It's not like someone could suddenly build 4 ADUs on a lot or something like that. But, and other places might be, well, we're not quite sure, but let's do special permit, which gives the planning board a little bit more discretion. And in other areas, you just might say, well, look, if we have some true single family home area where it doesn't really make much sense, then, let's, I know other towns have started to do it all across their towns. I think that's pretty broad. I'm not sure Southborough would be ready for that. I know there are, I sure know some people in this town that would not be ready for that, but I will tell you though, I even have some cousins that have this in New York. New York, in Long Island, it's much more common. This is actually becomes an important source of income for the homeowner too, as well, right? So it's things that put kids through college, right? or do other things, right? It really supports it. So this isn't like something that's opening up the door to huge developers coming in and suddenly doing 5,000. Like, it really is based upon a homeowner, that's really driving this at the end of the day. So anyways, those are my thoughts.
Thanks, Doug. Okay, any more discussion on the MRD? So I believe at this point, based on the discussion, we should probably bring this forward again to another meeting and try to figure out a way to make adjustments or additions, or have a joint meeting with maybe the planning board, board of select, whoever we're supposed to
talk about accessory dwelling units, or
I think both, and that and making the changes that you're talking about in the MRD. I just need more discussion on it. I don't think that we're going to solve it tonight.
I do agree with what Doug just said about having, maybe instead of having it by right townwide, having it by right in certain districts.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I just think we're going to.
That actually makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I think before we try to set up something joint with the planning board, we would have arrive at a more definitive conclusion about what we would be trying to accomplish. And I think maybe I need to sleep on this discussion a little bit.
Sure.
Okay. But we can bring this up on a future meeting and discuss it and try to kind of narrow it down and come up with a game plan and then go to the next step with it. Is everybody on board for that?
Yep, sounds
Okay.
good.
All right. Okay.
good.
The MBTA community submitted document that was due to the state. That was the first segment of documents that we were supposed to submit from the town. I did not get that. I was hoping to have received that. I did request it. So as soon as I get it, which will probably be tomorrow, I will forward that. I will just forward that directly to you. So you have a copy of it.
But it was submitted by the 31st. It did get in.
I'm sorry.
It did get in. We got it in. The planning board got it in.
Submitted. Yeah. So I asked Sarah to make some changes, which we all discussed. Those changes were accepted. And I'm not sure if anything else was added or changed on that document from the last discussion on it. But as soon as I get that from Colleen, I will forward that to you. So hopefully
the last draft of that document I had was pending review by the select board.
Right.
No, so the two members of the planning board appear, Mimi and Marnie, were before the select board at our January 31st was yesterday.
Yeah.
The meeting before that.
The
Or maybe it was the meeting before that. But my recollection was, yes, the action plan was being submitted. There was also a story in the Boston Globe about recently on the Saturday business section about MBT action plans, about how this was starting to roll. And the action plan, it's just a pretty simple document.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
like you fill in some bubbles. You know, one of them, what's your general sense? Do you want to go overlay district or create a new district? And then the preference here was to do an overlay district. It's then, but one of the things you have to do is you have a schedule, what you're going to do next. And that's where it really starts to be, what is it? Annual town meeting next year.
Well, the
To
deadline to
actually
adopt
have-
the zoning is the end of 2024, right? So we're on the clock now. We got 2 years to actually implement the zone.
on the clock.
Yeah.
So that form did go in. I'm assuming the Board of Selectmen approved it then. That's how it got to go
Yeah.
in.
I don't recall whether we were really like approving it or not, but just being informed about what was happening.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a necessary step. If you don't do that, then you're out of the game.
Yeah.
So this keeps us in the game to get the zoning.
So quick
Or
question.
not losing eligibility for grants by submitting the
Right.
if you were to, it's a pretty simple piece of paper to submit this, but then you have to keep going once you're on it. But
Yeah.
So who's taking is the planning board taking the lead on this? Is the Board of Selectmen, Andrew? Like, so who's driving this? I mean, obviously we have a vested interest just because of the potential affordable, housing that could come along with it, but who actually really is spearheading this for the town to make sure that we don't run out of time?
Well, all zoning stuff goes through planning. So it was the business manager of the planning department, Colleen Stansfield, that was directly in charge of preparing the document and submission.
and planning also got a grant, technical
good.
assistance grant from the
Great.
state, right?
I was just going to say, this is a big undertaking to create an overlay district like this.
And there's also a bump in funding for this year. Some additional money for planning board. They have retained Bowler, right?
Yeah, we have a meeting with them tomorrow at 1:00,
Oh, okay.
and I'm going to participate in that meeting.
Just out of curiosity, do you know who it is from Bowler who you're meeting with?
Hang on, I'll tell you. Let me see if it's in the email. Hold on.
Josh Swirling.
I'll have to find the email from Colin. Hang on. We'll be meeting with Angela Bodo and Zachary Dumont, engineers from Bowler.
Do you know them, Doug?
No, those names are not familiar to me.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Me either. Yeah.
So we're gonna have about an hour discussion tomorrow. we're slated for a time between 1 and 2. I will
Oh,
also write
glad
some
it's getting
stuff
out
and I'll fill you in. So we're moving right along. We're just, sometimes it feels like snail's pace, but I think we're doing a pretty good job at it. So we'll just keep plugging at ours, what we can do. I mean, we're not in charge, so we're just gonna follow planning's lead. All right, so we'll get that document to you as soon as possible. Andrew, special town employee designation, special municipal town. I can't say that. Whatever.
So that is on the agenda for next Tuesday, select board meeting.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so this has already been discussed a little bit, at least brought up. So this is what I was working on most of the day today. We know with the MBTA communities, we have to come up with a 50-acre, either a 50-acre parcel or 10 acres, which is our new designated amount by the train station. And then the rest of it can be 5-acre groupings all around town. The ability to try to get a larger parcel is actually something we can grasp and get our hands on right now. Hopefully, if the town would do this. The EMC Dell property is 39 or 39.5 acres in size. So what I've been working on today, I've actually talked with Mimi Luttrell. I've also called Freddie Gillespie with Open Space. And I'll tell you what I was thinking today and trying to pull together and in a joint meeting, because as you know me very well, this board should be involved in every decision that I'm trying to work on, and I would never do anything that you guys didn't know about. I also called a real estate agent who is working on selling that property. There is no sale price on it right now, but they are marketing it as a 40B. And my thought was twofold. I believe we should make that an overlay district of the 39 or the 39.5 acres. That will help us get the biggest piece for the MBTA community's requirement, and then take the difference is either 10.5 or 11 acres and put that around the train station, because we have to have a minimum of 10 acres anyway as another overlay district. Those two areas would give us our 50 acres that is required by the MBTA community's rule. So if that's an overlay district, the other thing I was thinking, and I really want to have a really big discussion with you guys on this, because I've just been working on this today, all day, except this morning. I think it would be advantageous to the town of Southborough to have an area that doesn't impact the neighbors, that doesn't impact our direct roads through neighborhoods, that doesn't impact the traffic patterns, could cause congestion. I think that the EMC Dell property would be the perfect spot to do an affordability development, whether it's 40B or something in the size of at least 100 units. We need 76 units to reach our safe harbor. If we could get 100 units in there, and in conjunction and working with the planning board and with the open space group, and do a very large portion of that as open space in behind what we would build, not us build, but somebody would build for us, or build, you know, as this development for affordability to protect the neighborhoods. I think it's Deerfoot and Fairview and whatever roads are impacted, neighborhoods are impacted, to protect them, to give them their privacy, not to hurt their property values, and do all open space in that area. Build 100 units, and then maybe put a playground in there or a small field. And again, it all depends on if there's wetlands in there or what the topography is on that land, which I don't know. I haven't walked it. I haven't looked at it. I haven't talked to anyone directly involved with the actual property except the real estate guy, and I didn't get into that with him today. The access to that property is through the EMC campus. It's not through a neighborhood. It doesn't impact the neighbors. It's the perfect place to make a small little community for affordability for our town. We're not, if we say, like, even in my neighborhood, no one's gonna say, oh, we don't want that in our neighborhood. That's not what you're gonna hit here. This is something that will benefit seniors, people who are just starting out, teachers, first responders, people who need help and they need serious assistance, people who work in our town, people who need help and have a place to live, and give them a beautiful area that is protected, that is private, has a play area for small children, even like, or a dog park or something to make them feel like they're special and they're part of the community, even though they're really on the other side of Route 9, they're kind of far removed. But if we can make it very welcoming and very inviting, I don't know exactly how to do that. I don't think that the town of Southborough wants to be a landlord. So I don't think it's something we want to do and build it. So we would have to find an affordable developer. I really need you guys to jump in on this and give me your thoughts, because we need to be proactive. We cannot sit back and just let this fall in our laps. We have to go after this. And I think that we should consider purchasing it. I don't know what the purchase price is. I'm trying to find out now. They have not set purchase price. I actually kind of floated the idea of maybe donating it to the town. So, you know me, I try, but I really want to have a huge discussion with you guys, really get your thoughts, what you think we should do. There's plenty of groups. I'm already looking at groups to bring in to talk to us about what they would do to build there, how to get it built, what we need to do as a town, so that we have all the information. This is probably going to have to be discussed at a town meeting or a special town meeting. And Board of Selectmen are definitely going to have to be involved, because they are the only ones who can purchase property in the town. So,
or the town meeting needs approval to purchase.
I think this Board of Selectmen are the only ones in town who can purchase it, and then yes, it has to go to town meeting, but you guys have to approve it first. I think, like, you have to want to do it because you're the ones who present it and have the authority to make the purchase with town meeting. I might be wrong, but that was my understanding. I'll let you check into that. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, what I've heard about this, and that I'm 100%. I think this is the right location for something like this, and helps check off a lot of boxes for the town. My impression was there's a forthcoming, that the owner of that property is looking to sell it to someone that's gonna build a private development there, and that does the best the role the town could be is just give early indications that yes, this is something we're interested in and we want to continue to the discussion with us. But I think it gets a lot more complicated thinking about having the town purchase the land and then selling it to someone else. Much more complicated.
Right. And I know they're marketing it as a 40B, so they want someone to build multifamily there. They want, and it's not necessarily like affordability, like we really want affordability. But I know that's how they're marketing it. And I'm not suggesting we be the landlords and I don't think we can afford to outright buy it. I don't think the town can do that. But at a bare minimum, we can make it our overlay district. But it would be really nice if somehow we can work it out. I mean, we do have some money. If we could take a look at what it would cost to buy it and see what the feasibility is of actually purchasing it, and then maybe selling it to a developer who would do an affordable. There's a lot of affordable developers that do these type of things. There are numerous ones. So it's not out of the question. It's just doing the homework to get the information, which I'm into doing now.
So what is the meeting? What is the meeting tomorrow?
Tomorrow is with the Bowler group for the engineering for the
MBTA communities.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
That's with the technical assistance to help.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Kind of maneuver through.
So maybe just jump in here too. So Andrew, it's definitely on the market. I mean, I think even HYM got an email, but I love my hometown, and I'm not looking to do a Chapter 40B anytime soon in my hometown. But I do think this is going to be a market-driven process. You know, it would be interesting definitely to get the information and to see if there is an opportunity to just, you know, potentially to acquire it. I just think it would be not insignificant purchase price, right? That's the thing. It would be, you know, but that would be interesting to find out more information. I do think absolutely makes sense to do the MBTA Communities Act overlay district in this area. But it may not be the entire site. I'm not sure. This is a question for Jesse. You know, if you can partly zone, you know, a parcel, I'm sure you can like split it, because one thing is the MBTA Communities Act does have a minimum density per acre, right? And so the one thing we got to keep in mind, this is a big site, right? So yeah, I think what was the minimum, 14 units per acre? I'm trying to remember what it said.
15 units an acre.
Yeah. So it's just something to keep in mind, because again, this could actually probably accommodate, you know, 300-400 units, you know, depending on what's buildable, right? At least from an acreage area, right? So that's just something to keep in mind too. And so we need 50 acres, and we need 10 acres at the MBTA station, correct? So the other 40 acres can be anywhere else.
Yes.
So that's just something to keep in mind too, because you could lose. I mean, it's a great idea about the town buying it, because otherwise, if you do overlay it, you know, with the MBTA Communities Act, you got to meet that minimum acreage density, right? So that does, you know, make it, which may not be a bad thing for this community, right? Because we want to try to get as much affordable housing as possible. But I'm just throwing that out there as a little nuance there, that we may not have as much control over trying to cap it at 100 units, because the MBTA Communities Act actually requires at least 15 units per acre, and just at 10 acres, that's 150 units.
Yeah, just a quick couple of comments on that, Doug. One, just keep in mind, you know, this is the MBTA community zoning is just zoning. So it has to zone to allow for 15 units an acre. That doesn't necessarily translate into a developer actually doing 15 units per acre. But you know, as a developer, that the developers want to get as many units as they can to get a return on their investment costs. Another quick point on affordable housing, just for comparison. So the MBTA Communities Overlay District does not in itself have an affordability requirement, but they allow they will allow municipalities to build in affordability requirements into the zoning district, but there's a 10% cap.
Correct. Yeah.
They cannot mandate that more than 10% of the units be affordable. Now contrast that with if somebody comes in and does a 40B project. In a 40B project, 25% of the units have to be affordable. So with our SHOPC hats on, I guess I'd say, I'm not great at math, but I think 25% of the units being affordable is better for us than 10% of the units being affordable.
One thing, Tom, to go on top of that too, if it's a Chapter 40B rental development, you're allowed to count all of the units, not just the affordable units, towards your 10%.
That's good for the town. It's not that great for SHOPC, right?
No, understood. Yeah. But just that's another nuance there too as well.
Right.
So
which would make it maybe more politically feasible for the town, because unlike us, other people don't want to reach the threshold so people can't do 40B projects. But we, being SHOPC, who want more multifamily housing, you know, like 40B projects, we don't necessarily want a bunch of rental units to count towards a cap when there could be other projects that actually have actual affordable units.
But you know, going back to this definitely is a great location for the town and SHOPC to take advantage of it in a way that brings more affordable housing to it, and maybe also starts to solve, you know, the MBTA Communities Act on top of it. And you know, and if there is a way to get a hold of the land, that's very interesting. I just think that might be challenging, but I'm not opposed to it. Just like you said, we have to find out more information, and because we will be competing with market rate developers too, which could be challenging for the purchase price for us as a town too.
I just don't think it's really feasible for us to buy it and develop it ourselves. I mean, that seems like sort of pie in the sky.
Just to address Doug's question about the zoning districts, they do split lots frequently.
So in terms of like things that we can do to keep I have yet to hear from anyone who opposes the idea of you would put the flexible part of the MBTA communities required as of right district on that site. I've yet to hear anyone that thinks that's a bad idea. So that's good. Another thing that we've talked about at the select board is we've now had 2 years in a row where we've had both an annual town meeting and a fall town meeting. And then there's benefit to that of focus the annual town meeting in the spring on fiscal planning, anything that's got a fiscal impact so that it affects, you going into the next fiscal year. But then things that are not directly related, but that generate a lot of discussion, and that zoning land use articles are definitely things that are often, well suited to a fall town meeting. So now one of the things with the fall town meeting is if you do it in we did one time, I don't remember what the date of the last one was, but one time it was November 1st, that time. One of the issues is you come out of August, a lot of boards only meet once in August, and then boom, in September, you really got to start making progress. But anyway, I mean, do you think it's possible that this is really a planning board, issue, Jesse? Do you think it's possible that if it's relatively not controversial, that we would put the MBTA communities required overlay district on that site to have it on track for a fall town meeting rather than annual town meeting 2024?
So fall of 2023?
Yeah.
It's a little ambitious considering if we want it to actually pass, I would not go that route because we would want to have the public hearings. I would envision being fairly lengthy for this agenda item. So to try it, I would say maybe, because to your point, I have not heard a lot of pushback.
Yeah.
Yet.
There's not a lot of neighborhoods right around there that would be
you're right. In that context,
just something to think about.
What's the rule? Doug, you probably know this, or you might know it too, Andrew. If you put a proposal up like that and it gets shot down, there's a rule for a zoning permit. If it gets shot down, you can't resubmit it for 2 years,
unless there's a favorable planning board report, right?
But
also,
what about if for a zoning change, does that same 2-year block apply to a zoning change as opposed to a zoning permit?
No, I was talking about, I believe there is a rule you submit a proposed change to the zoning law. And this is the point of this rule, is to prevent a developer from just saying, we're just going to put this on. We're going to work with someone to put this on every year.
Okay, that's what I was going with it, because I was trying to say, hey, because we do have a end of 24 deadline, so there's only 2 fall meetings.
If you go for it and you lose,
you're blocked.
It can't come back unless there's a favorable planning, unless the planning board supports it. Okay. You can get around it by having the planning board support it.
So maybe that is a reason to wait until the 2024 fall meeting.
Well, I would do spring. I hear what you're saying, Andrew, but I would do spring. And then if we have to, because we've had a couple of warrant articles recently involving scenic roads and tree protection that we've, what were you going to say? I can see you have a comment about that, Andrew. What is it?
No.
Well, I was just, okay. The town meeting has allowed us to effectively, I believe the term is indefinitely postponed, so that we can, instead of getting voted down, they allow us to
withdraw it.
Sort of.
So
that we can just come to the next one with what we think will work.
That's kind of where I was going too.
I think we want to give ourselves that leeway. I think we want to give this. We want to give this 2 town meetings so that the first pass, and inevitably, I mean, I've seen for stuff that I thought had no chance of any pushback at all, these two warrant articles that we did for, one was for solar, commercial solar, and the other one was for restricting recreational marijuana outlets. And I was shocked on town meeting floor when people had pushback to these things. So I'm just saying, people will come out of the woodwork inevitably on town meeting floor, even despite the public hearings. They don't show up at public hearings, but then they show up at town meeting and blow it apart. So I think we would want to give ourselves two chances.
All right, yeah, I'm just throwing it out there to consider. Is maybe the first shot is a fall town meeting 2023, and the second shot is I think what we're talking about is not that complicated, and we have had two fall town meetings where the first, or the primary thing to consider has been a land use article. The last one was the tree and scenic roads. I think that was the first or second article, and the one before is downtown district, November 1st, 2017. I mean, 2021.
So we're talking about MBTA communities, right?
Yeah.
So it's 30 acres on the site that we're talking about, but that has to be with also the 10 acres.
You're right. That's a good one. A good point.
It's going to have to be.
That makes it more complicated.
It's going to be two warrant articles. It's going to be two separate overlay districts.
It is
10.5 in one area and 10.5 in another.
We're sorry. That's news to me.
You're going to put it in one warrant article?
I thought it would be.
Okay.
Because we can't have one passing and the other one failing.
Yeah, because you know 50.
Okay. So. That's true. I just thought because they're two separate areas.
Jesse, I had not thought about that. You still have to pair it with the 10 acres around the train station. That does kind of affect things. Okay.
Right, but it is also two completely separate areas that, one
will attract a lot of public hearings. Yeah.
One's a neighborhood, literally a neighborhood. The other one's just land in the middle of nowhere.
I do think we have hit a very positive, significant step in terms of identifying the land for the 30-acre part. So that really does help our cause in terms of getting MBTA communities.
I agree. You got to focus on the positive parts. That's a very positive part.
Yeah, I think this can be accomplished, and this is a win. I think this is a win for the town because it will put us in good standing with the state, and we can't lose any grants, which is great. There's also, I'm going to jump to the grant opportunities just for a second. There's also a couple of grant opportunities for us that have just opened up as well. So the one stop has opened up, and we are going to go for that if that's okay with everyone on the board. I would like a vote to vote on that. And then Sarah and I spoke with a gentleman from the state, and he mentioned a few other grants that we could go for. So we're looking into those right now, but we definitively are going to go for the one stop. So
and what's that for?
As long as that's okay with you guys.
What's that grant for? What are we looking for money to do?
Sarah, you want to explain that whole big grant? Because last year it was $40,000 that we tried to go for, and then the Board of Selectmen voted to let EDC take it instead of us. And then we found out from the state that we both could have had one.
Yeah, so we had previously come up with a submission. I'm going to review that from, I think it was 2 years ago. But, One Stop has a really broad scope, right? So I think that we could sort of discuss that in more detail next time, sort of what avenue we want to look at. I mean, I think it would probably be more geared towards planning, right? Rather than like development at this point, just because of where we are in terms of our process. The other grant that we had talked about with a representative from DHCD was the housing choice designation And so it's a designation that we would get based on the stock of housing, affordable housing that we have. There's these percentage rates that you have to meet in order to get that. So looking for that potentially to get that designation. And then once we get the designation, then we have access to the grants.
So the money would be used to help us get that designation, and that would be the.
I think so. And so once next time we meet, I'll have.
Yeah, no worries. I'm just curious. I mean, it's always, hey, I'm never opposed to getting money. I'm just curious.
Yeah, right.
something specific we're planning to.
Well, he was going to send us some more details, and we could have more conversations with him. So, which I told him that he could definitely plan on, because we would be calling him again.
Yeah, when we spoke with him, he indicated that it's really important that we verify with the building department permits from the last 5 years, because the information that DHCD has is not real-time data. So I would have to work sort of closely with the building department just to verify the permits that were issued, because in terms of creation of housing, they take into consideration permits issued. So perhaps they haven't necessarily been developed yet, but as long as they've been permitted, they count towards this particular designation. But I can have, again, more information on that.
Sounds good.
Any other questions on the grants, since we jumped right into that? Okay, I'm going to go back to the EMC Dell property. Does anybody have any other additional discussion on that for right now? Okay, so yes, I'm going to continue. Oh, I know what I wanted to do. What I've done is I've called Mimi Luttrell, in charge of planning, and I've talked to Freddie Gillespie. I think, and I believe the best way to handle this is a joint venture into trying to work to figure out what's the best avenue to, if we were to go the route of purchasing this, how would we want to break it down? How would we want to have it developed? Talking to different affordable developers. I think we have to look at both avenues until we get shut down. Like, we know a price, it's, $30 million. Well, we already know that we're not going to do that. We can step back, but I think it might be beneficial for us to all sit down and talk with the open space people and the planning, and just have a roundtable discussion where we're all on equal footing. No one's literally in charge. It's just all of us together, kind of throwing out ideas and trying to come up with a scenario that would work for the town. That's what I was thinking. And I had mentioned maybe February 15th, because it looks like we have a meeting scheduled right now on February the 15th.
Excuse me.
Bless you.
Does anybody, do you guys think that's a good idea, or do you want me to just meet with the three ladies and kind of figure stuff out from there, and then do a meeting later, like in March? We just have to be proactive on this. We can't sit back. We've got to move. We're going to do one thing or the other. I mean, we have to make a decision sooner than later.
We have a meeting on February 15th.
Yeah, I had that on my schedule, and I don't know if we changed.
I've got it on my calendar.
From the 15th to today, the 1st, because we wanted to meet sooner. But I had the 15th down as an original meeting. So we can change the date. I don't think that Freddie can meet on the 15th now anyway. But I'm kind of throwing it out there. What do you guys think? I just think it's beneficial.
I mean, my thoughts are, Dorianne, it sounds like maybe just a logical thing to do. Maybe for you to meet with them and just kind of get the lay of the land and get these ideas. And then if you think it makes sense, then start to shape it a little bit and decide what direction we may want to go, and then maybe do a joint meeting to,
okay.
That may be one way to do it.
Okay.
I can't, I have a conflict the evening of the 15th. I can meet in the morning of the 15th. Oh, no, I can't. Disregard. The 15th is out for me.
Yeah.
Okay, so are you guys okay if I just meet with Mimi and Freddie as the 3 chairs of those groups and kind of figure out a game plan and then bring everybody in and then have a huge discussion with all of us together? I just think we need to be collaborative with everybody who would be involved in this. And obviously the Board of Selectmen, but you guys have enough meetings on your plate. I think that once we kind of come up with something, then go to you. I don't think you want to be tied up with trying to figure it out and then have a meeting again. So,
Okay.
All right.
So
All
we're
right.
still gonna, we're still not gonna have the meeting on the 15th, right? It's only 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, no,
Move it to.
you'll be tired after Valentine's Day. Don't forget those flowers and candy. All right. So I'll meet with the two other chairs. I will get back to you and then we'll figure something out from there. We discussed grant opportunities. Okay, the other thing I have on the agenda is I guess there is some interest from the Historic Commission to purchase 5 Corderville Road. I guess they have gone to look at that property. They've walked the property. They've talked with my understanding is the estate person who's in charge of that property. And the Board of Selectmen wanted to meet with the Historic Commission and us on February the 7th, but we would not have a quorum, so we cannot meet. And I did let Kathy know that we could get a quorum of us at any other point during the month, but that one specific day, we were not going to be able to have a quorum. I have no idea. We were not invited to walk the property with anyone. I have no information on the property. I've just been told that there's an interest in this property. I
see that Kevin Miller, who's the chair of historical, he's here. I see in the audience, and I know he's knowledgeable about this, but what I understand is that under the demolition delay bylaw,
yeah,
they're in they voted to say that the property should be preferentially preserved, which then I believe, I'm not recalling whether it's a 6-month period or a 9-month period now.
It's a 9-month period.
9-month period. Okay, so there is a clock ticking, and it's interesting. I think it's worthy of discussion. The pros and cons are, on one hand, the property, I don't know if everyone's familiar with it. It's like a red house. It's between, there's one Corderville, which is an affordable unit.
Yeah.
Then there's another private property. And then I think there's this little red house. And then you've got Corderville Hall, where Board of Health, Council on Aging is, etc.
So it's the house right next to the senior center.
Exactly. Yeah. So
and they're saying that's got historic value.
Under the rules, I believe it's that if it was built before, I don't remember the date, but they voted that it should be preferentially preserved. So the alternative would be that property would be knocked down and a more kind of nondescript structure would be built there. I mean, it's a small kind of bungalow house. Now,
I know what it looks like.
Yeah,
I've not walked in, but I've seen it.
So it looks like it needs a lot of work, right? That's the kind of one of the main issues. But the benefit of having the discussion about whether it's something where, first off, there are definitely groups in town that I volunteer groups that might be willing to maybe pitch in a little bit to try to work on, maybe donate some labor to try to do some rehab work on the property. And it's interesting because if this was a property that kind of like one Corderville Road ended up being affordable housing unit, it's one where it doesn't fit the profile of what like other houses look like in Southborough, where they're McMansions or bigger houses, or it's a smaller house. It kind of keeps the fabric of what the the road would look like. So I think it's worth, having the discussion, and, opportunities like this don't come up all the time. The alternative is just, let the process go its way, and then someone else buys the property that could just knock down that home and build a bigger house that is, not affordable and isn't particularly architecturally interesting. So I think that there's going to be a joint meeting of Historical Commission. They have a quorum and are available to participate in the meeting on the 7th. I'll obviously be there because I'm on the select board.
Right. So my understanding is Historic wants to buy that and they want to make it affordable. Well, Historic is not, their purview is not affordable. We were not asked to walk that property. We have not been given any information on that property. We've been asked to attend a meeting where everybody else at that meeting has knowledge and has walked the property and knows everything about it. We're being blindsided. And I don't think that is the right way to handle this at all. And that's my perspective. I'm a little put off by it, actually. But in my opinion, this is a single family home, and this is going to cost a lot of money to renovate and bring it up to snuff. I mean, to make it livable. It could take all the money we have. And is that something that we want to invest in? And the other piece is, if that's an affordable home and that's going to be deemed some type of historic, the affordability piece, you're going to put a family in there that is struggling and needs help with affordability, and you're going to put the onus on them to maintain a historical home or something that's been deemed historical, and they have to keep up the historical value of that home. I don't think that's fair to do. So I haven't seen the property. I've seen the property, but I haven't walked the inside of it. But I don't think that is the right direction or the right choice for the town to make to purchase that. That's just based off of me looking at it from the road and seeing it from the senior center. And I really don't appreciate that everybody else has walked it, has all the information, Andrew, and SHOPC, whose actually purview is to do affordable housing, has been left out of any and all discussions about this property until we were asked to attend a joint meeting. I just don't think that was appropriate. And you know me, I'm going to tell you what I'm thinking. I just don't think that was the right way to handle this. So we can't make the 7th. I said we can make any other day. I would talk to you guys about it. But for Historic and the selectmen to be discussing affordable housing without us, it's not appropriate. And that's what I have to say about that.
So quick, Andrew, you can go if you want to respond first. I have a couple of questions, but Andrew, why don't you go first if you want to respond?
I mean, I'm interested in hearing more about this and finding more about the details, right? Because I think that obviously I agree that just you look at the property, it looks like it could need a lot of work, right, inside. But again, I know of some other people who I think that there might be some interest in, if you can arrange something where there's a group that might be willing to donate time, labor, and even money to work on some of the rehab. I want to hear more about this and see if there's something that the town might be able to help out with.
I have no problem with hearing more about it. I just feel that the date should be changed so that SHOPC can participate. And we should have had a walkthrough before the meeting like everybody else had to walk through. We haven't seen it. We have zero information. We did not do a walkthrough. We weren't invited to do the walkthrough. And Historic was, and they did. And I'm sorry, you want an affordability and you've got a group that works on that and you have completely left them out of the conversation. And I'm not saying you personally, Andrew, at all. It's not right. It's wrong. It's really wrong. You can't just circumvent what's happening and cross lines with committee. Our purview is affordable housing, and we should have been included on the conversation.
So
I feel very strongly about that. And I'm not against it, but we should have been included, and we have not been.
is it clear that if they bought the property, it'd be through using the money in the affordable housing trust fund that we otherwise depend on to do SHOPC related thing? Is that clear that those are the funds that would be used?
That's my understanding, is that that's part of something that would be considered as whether the affordable housing trust fund could be used to purchase.
Well, that is a bit of an issue, isn't it? Because if they're going to raid the entire bank account for affordable housing to devote to one piece of property, and the main driver behind it is preservation of historical value, but we don't get a big bang in terms of affordability, and we only get one unit. It seems a little off kilter.
Yeah,
And
so
I feel like this is the appropriate
CPC.
time to mention that, this is exactly why those in town that support the Community Preservation Committee having control of those funds and keeping it under their control and making sure that it does have to go to town meeting, does actually, and I'm still in favor, by the way, in principle, of the bylaw that would eliminate that step and streamline this into the Affordable Housing Trust. But this is a perfect example of those who would be against that warrant article and saying, hey, this at least makes sure there's going to be sufficient transparency so that people can't do things behind closed doors and get stuff done without the proper transparency and without the proper process.
And if they want a historic, they should go to CPC and they should get the money for historic. But most of that money's tied up with the townhouse probably. So there's probably not a lot of money. And for the Burnett house. So there's probably not a lot of money there. So let's make it affordable and go after the housing money. You know what? I'm going to be quiet on this. I just don't think this is handled correctly. And I'm actually, I'm not happy.
Doug had some questions on it.
To us. We've been left out of the conversation. It's not appropriate.
Yeah, so I'm gonna, I don't disagree with that. But maybe just ask some more basic questions. How much is the property being listed for? Do we actually know? What is the asking price?
I see Mr. Miller's got his hand in the audience. I think he knows so he could answer that question if he was permitted to speak.
Hold on. Okay, oops. Hang on, Kevin. Okay, Kevin, you should be able to speak right now.
Yeah, thank you.
I did this right.
Thank you very much. And thank you for allowing me to speak. I hope I can clear up any sense of offense that might have been generated. I will say that when the Historical Commission toured the property in December, it was pursuant only and solely in our duties with regard to the demolition delay bylaw. It had nothing to do with affordable housing. Upon seeing the house and its condition and thinking about it quite thoroughly, it seemed to us and to me that our best hope of saving this house might have been as an affordable unit. And since the Historical Commission is in the business of trying to save historic houses, and I know that SHOPC is in the business of trying to put people in affordable housing, it seemed like a nice marriage. And so I spoke of this to the select board chair, and she wanted to organize a meeting with all three groups to attend, in which we could all be informed about the opportunity. And it's just really as simple as that. I mean, we haven't progressed one step beyond that. And I was very much looking forward to the opportunity of meeting with you all on the 6th or the 7th next week, and telling you what we know about the house and getting your input, and telling you about the history of the house. And, it's really an ideal location across the street from of course, Woodward School and Choate Field, and a chip shot to the community house and the library and the townhouse and all the, things that downtown Southborough has to offer. So it's an ideal unit, say, for a young family. I can tell you that it's a house that is quite historic, is on the state registry of historic homes. It, of course, sits in the newly recognized National Register District. It's in quite rough shape inside. The gentleman that lived there was chronically ill, and unfortunately maintenance suffered, and it would need a lot of work. However, it could be had for, by Southborough standards, unbelievably short money. And it was our judgment that it has great potential to be renovated into a house that, for instance, could accommodate, maybe a single mother with children, or, a young family. There's been a perk test on that property, and it only perks to 2 bedrooms, which is actually advantageous from our position, because the developer that wants to tear down that house and put up something much larger would have to sell it with so-called bonus rooms and only legally listed as a 2-bedroom, because the wetlands behind the house sort of limit the septic. So to preserve and restore that house, it could be brought back quite beautifully. It has some wonderful features on the inside. It could be, I think a small, affordable unit for a young family. I think with the right kind of public-private partnership, could perhaps be restored for fairly short money. And I know what the agreement, I don't want to give that figure out here. I'm happy to talk to you, Dorianne, or anybody else off camera, so to speak. Okay. But the money is quite short. And so the hope in this meeting was really to kind of involve you folks and bring you into the fold, so to speak, and just say, hey, let's not, I don't really care about who's, I very much respect everybody's separate sort of bailiwicks and what the purview and powers of different boards and committees are. But from my standpoint on historical, we're looking to make some friends here and make a partnership in which everybody wins. Maybe we'd save a house. Maybe you'd get to put a family in a house and do it for short money and do it in a very prominent location at the heart of downtown. So I hope you'll, think about just, coming and talking and embracing the possibility of what we could do together as friends and partners. And so I'm happy to answer any questions, but I don't want to take up too much of your time either. So thank you very much for listening to me.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, Kevin, thanks. I mean, again, it would be probably great to talk offline. We're just curious, because I do agree with Tom. Our goal is to maximize the funds that we have to create the most affordable units, right? And, a hefty amount that gets just to 1 unit, may not be exactly what we're thinking of at this point. But still, to Andrew's point, I mean, getting more information might be interesting. I did think about the accessory dwelling unit conversation with the garage in the back right-hand side, by the way.
Right. Can I clarify for you also that, of course, as Andrew pointed out, 1 Corderville Road is already a town-owned affordable housing unit. 3 is a beautifully restored private house. 5 is the subject house we're talking about. 7 is actually a private home. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then number 9 is Corderville Hall and the Senior Center. So it's a quite already very sort of civically oriented kind of section of town, with 1 and 9 already town owned. If we had town, number 5, you've got Community House again and Woodward across the street. So it's quite sort of symbolic. I do think it has the opportunity for SHOPC to make a statement about all affordable, like I listened with great interest about the Dell EMC parcel, and I quite agree with Dorianne actually on this sort of vision. But it would be nice also to make a statement that all the affordable housing in town doesn't have to be on the periphery. I've heard a lot of complaints about and proposals about the parcel at 1 Corderville Road, but there's another sort of argument that says that actually makes a very meaningful statement about a community's values, that 1/4 of the most important intersection in town is devoted to affordable housing. I personally find that very meaningful, and I think you could make a similar statement at 5 Corderville Road, and that again we could join together in a kind of partnership to, I just saw it, and this is the only reason I brought it up in the first place, Dorianne, is that I saw it as a win-win possibly for us. And incidentally, if you would like to tour the home, I've been in communication with the heir to the property. I would be happy to try to arrange that. But again, the walkthrough that we did in December was strictly pursuant to the demolition delay bylaw and what we had to do to prepare for our hearing on January 5th. So it wasn't that we were trying to sort of maneuver. I mean, I wasn't even thinking about that stuff at that point. I mean, I had, vague thought. I think, and, I will be frank with you that I think our only chance of saving this house is if the town were to acquire it and convert it to affordable housing. So I naturally see the opportunity. Don't get me wrong, but I do think that we could be very productive partners in this, and maybe it's a convincing argument, for a town meeting, for instance, that we're going to give a family a wonderfully located home, and we're going to save an important historic asset. So, thanks, Doug, for the question, by the way.
Kevin, do you know what your timeline is about when the 9-month demo delay is going to end?
Yeah, we voted 5-0 to preferentially preserve the property on January 5th. So it is a 9-month delay.
January 5th, you said?
Yes, January 5th.
That's when you took the vote.
That's when we took the vote. So
till September. 9
months from that date. So it's going to be till September. So obviously it'd be, and one of the advantages, I mean, I've talked again to the heirs about this, and one of the advantages to them, of course, is the hope that if there were interest in this from SHOPC and the BOS, and I presented it when I spoke to the heir that I don't know what they think. We'll find out, and maybe they're on board and maybe they're not. But if this did work out, it would allow the owner to be paid, of course, for the property much more expeditiously, I would hope, than waiting out the 9-month delay.
So Kevin, just in my experience, the best course of action in situations like that would be to approach the chair of SHOPC and ask to get on our agenda at an upcoming meeting. I think that, to Dorian's point, sort of setting up a joint meeting without any information being distributed to the members in advance. I can understand where Dorian's coming from, but I do appreciate you coming in and addressing the questions as you have.
Let me just clarify that, Jesse, that I don't call the agenda for the select board, of course.
I meant our agenda.
Yeah, I'd love to be on your agenda sometime.
Thank you for the clarification, Kevin. We should probably speak offline and get together.
Happy to do it.
Okay.
Happy to do it. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Kevin.
Okay. So I will speak with Kevin and find out what they're looking at for money. Probably see if we can get them into our meeting for the next agenda. That would move this more expeditiously, and that way we can talk to them directly. If everybody's okay with that. Okay, so we'll get historic on the thing. Sorry, I have to write it all down because I'm old now. Next agenda. Okay. Okay, I think we're done on that. Does anybody have any other comments or anything they want to add to any of the discussion? Okay, we have to schedule our next meeting. We're looking into March, because I don't think you want to meet again in February. Let's see. Does the first week of March look okay for everyone? Let's see.
Sure.
So that would be, it's that one.
Dorian, are you talking the week of the 6th?
I'm talking the week of the 6th. Yes.
Yeah.
So the 6th, 7th,
Good.
8th, or 9th. Does anybody have any limitations on those days?
I can't do Tuesday the 7th because select board meets on Tuesday nights.
Okay, do you want to meet on March the 8th? Does that look okay for everyone?
That's okay with me.
That's
Yeah.
good,
Okay.
man.
Do you want to meet in person? If we're going to meet with historic, do you want to meet in person and have a discussion, or do you want to do Zoom?
I'm a Zoomer.
You're a Zoomer. Okay. March. Oh, I wrote March instead of. All right, I've got this.
March 8th at 7 p.m.
March 8th, 7 p.m. is our next meeting, and I will invite historic to join us. If there's an issue and they can't meet us on that date, I will reach back out to you guys. Okay, and we'll try to work around that. Okay, no other discussion. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, Tom,
Aye.
Andrew,
Aye.
Doug,
Aye.
Jesse,
Aye.
and Dorian is aye. Gentlemen, thank you very much. And Sarah, thanks guys, and I will be in touch.
Thanks, everybody.
everyone.
Have a
Good
great
night.
Thank you.
week.
Take
Bye.
care.
Bye.
Bye.